I've been influenced by tons of great artists over the years. And in this lesson, I wanted to break down my top 5 artists that sort of had the biggest influence on me and my art styles. So the first one is probably my most favorite artist, as well as has the biggest influence on my art, is Moebius, or Jean Giraud. He had kind of influenced me more than I had really known, just because like growing up, my favorite film was The Fifth Element, and it turned out that he had like one of the biggest roles as a concept artist in it. And when I first kind of discovered Moebius was when I started seeing like these really cool, colorful sci-fi illustrations online. And yeah, digging deeper, I've seen that he did work on Fifth Element, and kind of knowing that just made it even more my favorite film, just because he had worked on it and it was just mind-blowing at the time. So this French comic book artist has really influenced my style and still does. I still heavily look at his images for inspiration of like, maybe even trying to like mimic his style with the toon shaders and getting like a cool color palette from him. So my second biggest influence is Katsuhiro Otomo, and he's the creator of the Akira manga, as well as having like a huge part in creating the Akira film. When I watched Akira for the first time, it was like such a unique experience in how he sort of sculpted this environment, universe where everything's sort of like dark and gritty, and his use of like the big oversized heavy machinery, as well as just having like tubes and pipes everywhere, as you'll also see in my work. This kind of grounds it more in reality, as it seems like it's made from the stuff you see kind of like around like old like factories and stuff. That sort of whole like sci-fi vibe he has in his work, it just kind of makes it so fun to like look at and just kind of like be in the worlds he's creating. This elevator scene kind of like really inspired myself to make a scene similar to that, as well as kind of push my style a bit. It's kind of like this big sort of like chunky mechanism, and it just kind of feels like a crude and built for purpose rather than like cosmetics. And I feel like that sort of like pushed how I design my sci-fi scenes, just to have like where they're like super chunky and really built for purpose, where you can see like the tubes moving everywhere, as well as like these just oversized mechanical things having like a big impact in the scene. So on the other side of the art world is my next big influence, Ivan Shishkin. He's an 1800s Russian oil painter who sort of focuses on making like insane realistic landscapes of like forests and like fields and winter trees and bear cubs playing with like the mother, climbing up logs and stuff. He's like one of the biggest influences on me for my realistic scenes. Just like the use of color and the lighting, the vibe that he is able to create with his trees and like landscape. It's crazy to think that despite the fact that he's from the 1800s making oil paintings, that he's able to influence 2022 artists like myself in like 3D modeling and stuff like that. When you see a bunch of those like retro sci-fi art book covers and illustrations, you've probably came across John Harris, who is also one of my biggest influences. He's done countless sci-fi book covers and illustrations in his like line of work. His style is like so unique, how he's able to sort of like blend his atmosphere of like the scene around his spaceships to sort of give them such like an eerie, like almost like ghostly, out of this world feel. And his use of color is just so unique. Purples and yellows, and somehow making them feel like gritty and just like otherworldly. So he has influenced me in like a little bit of a different way, where I kind of went off track of 3D and started to do like a lot of digital painting to come up with some fake sci-fi book covers of my own, just as like a fun activity. And I just love every minute of making those. The last influence I wanted to talk to you guys about is Sparth, or Nicolas Bouvier. He has kind of shaped me probably more than I realized since I was young, just from playing like thousands of hours of Halo with my brother and friends. And his use of color palettes, where he's able to have like a nice bright color palette and just bring his sci-fi works to life with them, is just amazing to look at. I also really like how he likes to dive into a lot of other styles as well. He doesn't really focus on just like the one digital painting style. He's got like somewhere it's like more realistic, and somewhere he's using actual like squares to create a little like sci-fi scene. But in the end, all his works are just so fun to look at, even from like a fully fledged completed render to a 30-minute speed painting. These are my top 5 favorite artists that have influenced me and my style, with Moebius and Otomo, where they kind of pushed me into more of that toon direction. Shishkin kind of pushed me more into that realistic direction, and John Harris and Sparth kind of mixed bag into there, where they gave me a lot of just overall sci-fi. And the last two, John Harris and Sparth, where they kind of influenced me on an overall sci-fi level, as well as getting those fun, colorful color palettes into my work. In the next lesson, we'll talk more about what materials you will need to complete this course.